two siblings, one attending Florida State University and another one attending Eckerd College, decide to meet up at a campsite together for a siblings weekend. The joy that must have been brought to their parents, who were in the military and stationed in Okinawa, Japan at the time. But just knowing that their two children were still as tight as siblings should be, along with the comfort of knowing that the two of them would be together at the time so they would be able to protect themselves, right? What could possibly go wrong? Well, apparently a lot. But for no other reason besides the fact that these siblings were at the wrong place at the wrong time. It would take 30 years, okay? But finally, on August 29th, 2024, these siblings would get their justice. I suppose I should fill you in on everything that went down first, right? So, without further ado, here we go. Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. It truly, truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so because it really helps me out and I really, really appreciate it. So, 1994, 18-year-old John Timothy Edwards was a first-year chemical engineering major at Florida State University in Tallahassee. His sister, 21-year-old Pamela Edwards, was a student at Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida. So, for context, Florida State University, where John attended, is around 4 hours and 28 minutes from Eckerd College, which is where Pam attended at the time. So, Friday, February 18th, 1994, John drives 2 hours and 49 minutes from Florida State University to Ocala National Park. At the same time, Pam Edwards was making the 2-hour, 20-minute trip from Eckerd College to Ocala National Park to meet her brother for a siblings camping weekend trip. After meeting up, the siblings decide to set up camp at Hopkins Prairie. So, shortly after beginning to set up camp, they would meet and befriend 27-year-old Loran Cole, but he wouldn't introduce himself as Loran. He would introduce himself to the siblings as Kevin. And he would end up helping the siblings finish setting up their campsite. So the two thank Cole and he goes on his way while they sit down to have dinner together. Then a short time later, Cole returns to the Edwards siblings campsite with 20-year-old William Paul and William Paul's walking stick. William was a drifter at the time that Loran met and befriended him. He told the siblings, however, though, that William was his brother. Four sat around the campfire for a while and chatted. Then at around 10:45 p.m., Pam, John, Loran, and William decide to go for a walk to a pond to look for alligators. But the four would never make it there. A very short time after they began walking, Loran knocks Pam to the ground. When Pam gets up and tries to run, he grabs her, pulls her to the ground, hits her on the head, and handcuffs her. So while this is going on, John is trying to fight back to protect his sister, obviously, because that's what siblings are supposed to do, right? So John grabs William's walking stick from his hand and he begins beating him with it. Cole runs over to help William subdue John, but not before Williams gets a pretty good beating. The men lay Pam and John next to each other on the ground, and the last words that John says to his sister are, "I'm sorry for putting you in this situation." And then Pam would later say that the reason he said this to her was because she didn't even want to go on the hike to begin with. The two men begin robbing the siblings, taking their money, wallets, keys, jewelry, and eventually Pam's car. Okay, so according to Pam's testimony, this is how everything plays out next. William Paul takes Pam up the trail, and the whole time going up the trail, he's complaining about his hurt hand and his hurt head because her brother kicked his ass a little bit. Loran stays back with John, and Pam remembers Loran asking John, "Why did you hurt my brother?" Who's actually not his brother, who I think he knew for 3 seconds. And she hears grunting sounds coming from her brother as she goes up the trail. When Loran finally meets up with William and Pam, he tells him that he was just waiting for John to pass out. He even yells back to John several times, who would respond with just like a groaning. Finally, Loran tells Pam that he's going to move John off the trail and that he'll be right back. Pam says she remembers hearing like a gaggling sound while Loran was moving her brother, but it would later be discovered that that gurgling sound she heard was her brother getting his throat. When he returned, he told Pam that he was having a little trouble with dinner, insinuating that he was vomiting, which is just, it sounds so twisted because I imagine that he was choking on his own blood. The three start making their way toward Loran Cole's campsite. Once there, Pam says that Loran forced her to sleep naked by threatening to unalive her and John if she didn't, and from there he proceeded to R-word her. The next morning, Loran gets up to check on John, comes back and tells Pam that he's perfectly fine. He's just tied up to a tree right now, but he's good. Don't worry about it. He leaves again, and then he comes back with some marijuana. The three smoke together, and then Loran R-words Pam again. Then they eat dinner. The two men pack up as much of the campsite that will fit into their backpacks. They tie Pam up to a tree, and they take off in her car. Okay, so let's take a slight detour and talk about who Loran Cole is for a few minutes, especially because one of his biggest offenses revolve around his childhood. So, Loran Cole was born on November 11th, 1966 to parents Don and Ann Cole. His parents would split when he was about 4 years old. He would end up moving to Florida with his mother and eventually his new stepfather. Life in Florida was not a good experience for Cole at all, though. He was sent to foster care for a period of time, and then one of his three sisters would actually testify that he had a bad problem that started around the age of 12. One family member testified that Loran experienced physical ABUSC, a transient and unstable lifestyle, and substance ABUSC by his parents. At 17 years old, Cole is sent to the Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys. Okay, let's talk about the Dozier School. For context, the Dozier School for Boys is located in Marianna, Florida. First opened its doors on January 1st, 1900. The purpose of the state-run school was to act as a reform school for troubled youth. There's actually an incredibly long and tragic backstory behind this whole thing. Not with Cole, with the school in general. And it's twisted. It's a little twisted. It was originally a school for boys and girls before switching over to just being a school for boys. The school was also forced to change its name quite a few times, but that's all a separate video. Okay, so the Florida Department of Justice would close the school permanently in 2011, but that's not until after a 111-year history of alleged ABUSC, beatings, R-words, and unaliving of students at the hands of staff and some of the older students. Along with this, many survivors of the Dozier School for Boys have spoken out. Robert Stray Lee attended the Dozier School in 1963 when he was just 13 years old. His mom was bipolar, and she would ABUSE him, so he would continuously run away from home. He would eventually be put into juvie for running away from home, and then he would begin running away from juvie. Makes sense, I guess. After being caught for the third time, Robert would end up being sent to Dozier. He says that when he pulled up to the school, he thought it was absolutely beautiful. But this impression would be completely wiped clean even before the first 24 hours. After being brought to his room and changing into his state-owned clothing, he goes outside and he makes a few friends, okay? So the boys are all outside chatting when Robert is asked if he wants to run away with them tonight. He tells him that he's been on the run for 3 weeks and that he's basically done with that. It's not what it seems to be. So apparently, while this whole conversation is going on, there's a boy standing behind them listening to it, who then runs back to staff and basically sings like a canary. At 8 p.m. that night, 2 staff and 1 older student put the boys in a black sedan and drive them over to what's known as the White House. Once inside, they're all lined up against the wall and brought into a room one by one. So Robert says that he's the last one on the line on this particular evening. He also says that this is the worst because you would hear the boys screaming one by one, knowing that it's almost your turn. When Robert's turn finally comes, they bring him in, place him on an army cot, put his hands on the rails, and tell him not to move. He says that he began getting repeatedly with the strap about 35 times. They bring him back to their cottage, he showers, and then he goes to bed. So this is just one of like many, 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 many horrible stories. There's a lot of stories out there. I can't even believe it. Then another man by the name of Jerry Cooper was sent there when he was 16 years old. One night, he says that he's pulled from bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and he receives 135 lashes. But this isn't where it ends. For at least the last decade, people are finding the bodies of at least 100 boys. 100 boys placed in makeshift coffins and buried on the school grounds. Some of the coffins, some of the graves have multiple boys in them on top of each other. Some of the boys had gunshot wounds. Some had blunt force trauma, and some were severely malnourished. Multiple survivors have come out to say that they would see their friends being taken out and that they would never see them again after that. When parents would question where their children were, the school would tell them that they ran away and that they haven't seen them since. Another reason not taking missing children seriously is a pet peeve of mine. Because of shit like this. If they survived, but they had bruises on them, they were not allowed to see their family members until all of it was healed. Then finally, in 2024, Governor Ron DeSantis, who's the same guy that would eventually go on to sign the death warrant, would sign a bill for survivors of the Dozier School for boys, along with a second reform school that attended between 1940 and 1975 to split a compensation check of $20 million. One recipient by the name of Paul Elgin says that he arrived at Dozier in October of 1964 when he was a teen and began running away from home because he didn't want to listen to his stepfather. Paul says that while he's working in the kitchen, he gives one of his friends some syrup, unaware that it's the staff's syrup. He's brought to the White House, told to lay down on the bed, grab the handrails, and bite down on the pillow. He says that when they're done, his bottom looks like hamburger meat. He was hit more than 35 times with a leather strap that had metal in it. It's terrible. I told you all of this to say that this would later become one of Cole's defenses, like, oh, well, I was sent to the Dozier school. And while there are other, well, now grown men from the Dozier school that are sitting in jail, because there are, um, not everyone that went to that school ended up unaliving people. So therefore, I don't know if that's such a great defense. I gotta be honest. I don't. I don't think it's that grand of a defense. Cole would later claim in court that while he was at the Dozier for his 6 month stay, he was R-worded, and had both of his legs broken from attempting to escape. Okay, again, I feel awful for that. For Loran, the child that went through that, I'm so sorry. For Loran, the adult, no. They don't cancel each other out. Let's just say that, okay? Going on to tell the court that he had suppressed those memories until around 10 years ago when he watched a documentary about the school. In mid 1988, Loran Cole would meet a then 16-year-old Colleen Kuckler at a friend's house party in Cincinnati, Ohio. The pair dated for around 6 years on and off, with Colleen saying that he was in jail for drugs and petty crimes a lot while they were together. During the relationship, the couple would end up becoming common law husband and wife. And when asked about her time with Cole, Colleen says, aside from the petty thievery, I was really drawn to him, his personality. He was fun, loving, and intelligent. In 1988, the couple welcomed their first child, a little boy that they named Ryan. So Loran would stay in his son's life for about 2 years before leaving. From there, he would frequently disappear and then show up incarcerated. When he would get out of jail, he would go to crawling back to Colleen, and Colleen would be there. This is until his final arrest. Colleen said she didn't hear from Loran again until detectives came knocking on her mother's door, looking to talk to her and letting her know that Loran was being tried for unaliving. Okay, so how did we get here? I know we went off on like a Loran Cole story, but that's because it's really just, it's all incredibly pertinent to the story. Sunday, February 20th, 1994, Pam frees herself by chewing through the ropes and running to find her brother.
Able to chew through the cord that they tied her to the tree with, and she came down looking for her brother, trying to find where her brother was.
But after an unsuccessful search, she decides to flag down a motorist who calls 911 for her. After Loran and William flee the scene, they go over to the mobile home of Mary Gamble, who's a former one-night stand of Loran Cole's. They arrive at the home in John's car, a 1991 Geo Metro convertible. They tell Mary that the car belongs to Cole's new boss. They had actually originally stolen Pam's car, but after they hit a pothole and damaged the car, they go back and switch Pam's 1991 Nissan Sentra for John's car. Can you imagine? Well, after all that, let's just go take random cars. It wasn't until Mary found a receipt in the car with the name John Edwards on it and watched the news that she put two and two together. During this time, while this is going on, Pam had gone to the police. She takes them to the spot where her and John were taken by the men, and they find the body of John Edwards. And she also puts out a composite sketch of both the men. So it would take Mary Gamble a full day, but eventually she would get Cole to admit to her that he R-worded Pam and he unalived John. Along with this, police receive a tip from a woman who sees the sketches, recognizes them, calls police, tells them who they are, gives names, I believe, and the two of them are arrested on February 21st, 1994. June 30th, 1995, William Paul pleads guilty to 1 count of first-degree unaliving, 2 counts of armed robbery, and 2 counts of kidnapping. He's sentenced to 5 concurrent life sentences at the Cross City Correctional Institute. Loran Cole pleads not guilty, and his trial begins on September 6, 1995. September 12th, 1995, a 12-person jury finds Cole guilty on all counts and sentenced him to death on December 21st, 1995. July 29th, 2024, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs the official death warrant for Loran Cole. Cole would stay on Rayford Prison's death row for 30 years and cost taxpayers $1.5 to $2 million, like somewhere around there. August 29th, 2024, Loran Cole would be executed by lethal injection at his Florida prison.
Cole's execution began at 6 with an IV in his arm and covered with a white sheet up to his head. He was breathing heavily a short time later, then more labored, eventually beginning to shake until his breathing stopped at 6:07. A doctor declared his time of death at 6:15.
Death row inmates are allowed a last meal as long as it does not exceed $40. So Loran Cole would actually end up having his last meal with his son and with a pen pal that he's had while he's been in prison for the, past how many years. August 29th, 2024. They ask Loran Cole if he has any last words, and of course he doesn't, not even, I'm sorry. They then administer 3 separate drugs. The first one is a sedative, and then the second one is injected and it paralyzes their body. And then the last one that's injected into you is the one that stops your heart. Fraternity brothers of John Edwards have actually spoken out since the warrant was signed, and they've said some pretty nice things, I have to say. Saying John had his whole life ahead of him. We missed his wedding. He missed our wedding. Watching the kids grow up, his career progress. I bet you right now he'd be coaching his kids in baseball. He wasn't forgotten. He was the kind of guy you would want your sister to date. When they asked how they felt about the warrant being signed, they said, I think there will be some closure that a lot of us have been waiting for a very long time. John was robbed of having a long, full life, so the death penalty was simply a natural outcome. Also saying capital punishment in this case was well-deserved and will bring relief to a lot of people, but he isn't sure that he'll ever actually find closure.
Horrendous, senseless crime that shattered our family. We are void of feelings and empathy for Mr. Cole. He placed himself into this arena. We could never sanction a reduction in his sentence. He does not deserve mercy. Though sentenced to death, Mr. Cole has been granted 30 years of life in Florida state prisons. During those 30 years, he has been free to read books, study, eat proper meals, sleep in a bed, get medical care, bathe and exercise, receive visitors, and to simply exist. This is something he brutally took from our son.
If you guys are still here, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you all so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet, because it really helps me out. I really appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe out there.